She's here to give us the latest on Rajesh Sundaram. Morning, Erin.
Morning.
Now, he claims he had 4 encounters with the former president. When and what happened?
So this was all in 2013, Sundaram being headhunted in India as a broadcast professional to come to South Africa, which he then duly did. And sometime between April and when he fled at the end of August into early September, he claims he had these 3 formal meetings with the then president and several others, including Atul and Ajay Gupta, Ashut Chalwa, Nazim Hawa, and Muhsin Williams. And he claims that Zuma had a very serious interest in the content of ANN7. He weighed in on the logo for the station. He spoke about how they should have subtle propaganda, claims Sundaram. And then the 4th meeting was a walkabout at the ANN7 studios just before that fateful launch, which I think many of us will remember because of some of the glitches.
That. Yes,
Yeah.
So that one's very hard to forget. Now, he's written a book about all of this, right? And we understand that the Deputy Chief Justice has some problems with the book. He has some reservations. What are they, and what do you have to say?
So the Deputy Chief Justice really grilled Sundaram on the aspect of direct quotation in the book. Sundaram said he wanted to create a kind of narrative style in the book. He distinguished it from a normal news report and said that he wrote it soon after he got back to India after fleeing South Africa. And so it was based on quite fresh memory, he claims. But Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo really took him to task over the use of direct quotes, saying that as a journalist, Sundaram would know that the use of direct quotes would suggest to the reader that you're saying exactly what the person said verbatim, word for word, when in fact that's not the case. Sundaram didn't transcribe the meeting with Zuma. He didn't record it, or the meetings with Zuma. And Zondo's saying you simply cannot do that. You're a journalist and you know better. And Sundaram saying at the end of it, well, perhaps in hindsight he shouldn't have done that, but he thought that it worked within the style and the structure of this book, which is indentured behind the scenes at Gupta TV. But Zondo really not happy with the way in which he went about writing this explosive book.
Does it affect his testimony, though?
I think it may.
To see that happens, yeah.
Yes, because on the tail end of that kind of interrogation, you could say, by the chair, Zondo then asked Sundaram about his final resignation letter, which he tabled with the Guptas when he wanted to leave ANN7. He made a commitment to himself that he would see through the launch of the channel, even though he was under extreme pressure, he says. He felt guilty that he'd recruited other broadcast professionals from India to South Africa. There was this very curious fast-tracking of their visa applications. He never went to an interview, he says. Ashut Chalwa, he was told, had connections right up to the presidency, and they were able to fast-track these work visas. But then Zondo asked him, if it was so terrible, if you had such an egregious time at ANN7, why is your resignation letter so glowing? And Sundaram saying he didn't want to leave on bad terms. He wanted to highlight the positives, few as they may have been, about working at ANN7 before he left. And so Zondo then saying to him, must I understand then that you weren't honest, you weren't true in how you reflected your time at ANN7 in your final letter? And to me, that line of questioning suggests that Zondo's trying to weigh up how to evaluate Sundaram as a witness.
Okay, so that's very interesting. We'll wait to see what happens when he's questioned by others. Now, he says that he fled the country back in August 2013. Now, why did he have to flee the country? And there's very interesting bits about what advice his wife had given him. I mean, was that on the advice of his wife, to get out now, come back home?
Yes, and to get a private ticket, because the Guptas had offered to buy him a business class ticket via Ethiopian Airlines back to India. But this was on a condition that he sign a certain document that he wasn't willing to sign. He thought that some leave was owed to him, some money for overtime was also owed to him. He says he worked 16, 18-hour days to try and get this channel up and running at a blistering pace, because he claims it was the sheer greed of the Guptas, who had a promise from the then president they would get revenues from ministries and departments. So the sooner they got up and running, the better. And yes, he says that he was almost destitute, that he was in this crisis moment. In the book, in his first chapter, you hear about him fleeing from the ANN7 offices and walking down the highway in Midrand with no one to call because he believes his phone is being monitored. And yes, he got some very shrewd advice from his wife back in India. Let's take a look.
I've never been as scared as that in my entire life. And believe me, I've covered civil war, I've covered wars and riots. But those last few days and hours in South Africa were the most scary in my life. I actually thought that I would die, that I would not see my family again, you know, and the kind of influence that they had. You know, one day after given the interviews, my hotel room was burgled. When I went to the police to file a complaint, they said that I told them that I'm leaving for India. They said that you can't file the complaint. It will have to be the hotel owner who does it. And the hotel owner filed a complaint at that time. Also, I couldn't go to the Indian High Commission because Virendra Gupta, who was the High Commissioner at that time, was a very close, had very close ties with the Gupta family. So I did not know how that would play out. So here I was all alone, thousands of miles away from my family, and I couldn't go to any of my colleagues because I would put them into trouble because they were there with their families and their children. And if I went and sought refuge at their home, they would be as much in trouble. So I was out there, and that's when I called my wife. And then she told me that, why don't you go to the media and tell them that your life is in danger? That way, when the whole world knows that if anything happens to you, it's because of the Guptas, they'll probably stay off. And then she booked me a ticket on South African Airways. And even till the time I was at the airport, when I cleared immigration, till I was in air, I was scared that, I would probably be brought back.
Goodness, Aaron, he makes it sound like he was working for the mafia.
And that's exactly what he said. He said he came here with all of these promises. He thought he was going to work in the free South Africa. He'd read about news articles in India. He got here. He claims he ended up working for the mafia, running a channel of propaganda, and that was something he just wasn't willing to keep doing. I do have one other funny thing I just want to share with you before I go, and that is I'd spoken to Sundaram about doing an interview with ENCA once we learned that he was coming to South Africa. He said he wanted to respect, of course...
Yes, he's come especially for this,
Yeah,
right?
he has. He flew directly from India, and he said the rules of the Commission mean that he can't speak to us until his testimony is done, and we're hoping to get him on later today. But funnily enough, he's brought his twin brother, who is an attorney, and I said to him in the corridors of the inquiry yesterday, you should have just let us interview your brother and no one would have known.
No one would have known.
But, I mean, obviously we wouldn't
we would never do that, Aaron Bates.
I thought it was a clever idea.
Not here at ENCA, but very, very novel thinking on your part, improvising. Well, let's see what happens. I mean, he's back today, and you better head off to Parktown. That's where you're going off now. Aaron Bates, thank you very much.